Hey everyone, welcome back to anyone who's joined us before, and welcome for the first time for you first timers. It is time for Ask Mark. This is a show where we have Mr. Marc Randolph, the co-founder and founding CEO of Netflix. He's the host of the That Will Never Work podcast and can also be seen on the new season of our show, Entrepreneur Elevator Pitch. But what's important here is that he is here to answer your questions. Mark, you ready for some stumpers?
Well, Dan, I'm always like a challenge, so I'm ready.
All right, good. Well, we got a bunch of questions that were already submitted, but as people already are doing, there is the chat box. Stick your questions in there, and we're going to get to as many as we can over the course of this thing. So, Mark, let's. This could be the last one of the year. In fact, I'm pretty sure it's the last one of the year. So I'm going to start with asking: are you a big looker backer kind of guy? We always talk about what's coming. But do you think there's a lot of value in looking at the year that just passed?
Oh, absolutely. I kind of figured out quite a while ago that if you're not really clear about where you want to go, the odds that you're going to get there are pretty slim. And part of that is doing a self-evaluation of how you did and what you might be trying to do differently. Um, I'm not a big New Year's resolution guy, but I absolutely plan about what it is I want to try and get accomplished. So it is right about now where I actually do look back and say, I had some objectives for the year, and how did it go? Um, how did I allocate my time? Were there things that I was completely wrong about that I'd be able to get accomplished? Here's something I felt was important, which I completely whiffed on. Why is that? I just feel that if you don't ask those questions, you're just going to make the exact same mistakes again in the future. And I did that a lot. I mean, certainly I did that at Netflix. I did that with Looker. I did that almost every company. Is you're constantly saying, "Oh man, that didn't work. What happened?" Um, I pride myself on making lots and lots and lots of mistakes. Because if I'm not making lots of mistakes, I'm not trying hard enough. But I pride myself even more on the fact that I don't make the same mistake twice very often. And that entirely comes from looking back.
Very good, very good. So let's get into the questions that are not from me. So this first one is from Julian Morris, who says, I like the process of creating a business, but I hate being a salesman. Do you have to be salesy to be successful?
Oh boy. As much as I want to encourage everyone, no matter what your background or skills. So the answer, of course, is no. You don't need to be anything. You have the flexibility of catering your business to who you are and what you're good at. But man, it is such an important skill to have. And if you don't have it, if it makes you uncomfortable, gosh, it is so worthwhile putting the time and effort into getting good at it. And let me give you a couple examples from my own experience. So I, for the first, gosh, I don't know, 20 years of my professional career, I never was in a business where I had to sell the product one-to-one to a person. I was a direct marketing guy. So 100% of the selling that I did was using advertising. It was using direct e-commerce. It was using catalogs, using direct mail. It was never me calling someone up or knocking on their door and trying to sell them. And it's because for me, that was a much more comfortable way to sell. But that's being a product salesperson. And you can absolutely get away with not being great as a product salesperson. But there's a different types of sales that you're going to need to do all the time if you are trying to raise money. Well, that's a sales process. If you're trying to recruit the best and the brightest people to come join you in your task, that's a sales process. If you're kind of convince other companies to partner with you to help reinforce your success, that's a sales process. If you're trying to convince someone to give you a break on prices, that's a sales process. In other words, you're constantly going to be trying to influence people to do the things that they may not know they want to do. And getting good at that is so important. But you can cater it to your own personal style. And I'll give you a very direct example. I'll put it this way. I didn't used to be a really good face-to-face salesperson. And I still prefer doing it in writing. I mean, I will take a little pride. My emails are works of art in some cases. I spend so much time getting that tone, the wording, what's the right subject, because I rely on that. I'd much rather email back and forth with someone than I would actually get on the phone and talk to them, because I'm so much better in email. But going back to this previous question, which was, what do I look back? I will often look back and go, gosh, I've got to get better at this. And so I have made very, very conscious efforts to get better at it. And part of it, the public speaking, is be much better at face-to-face selling. I tell the story in my book about when I was, in my 20s, and I was doing this urban survival exercise where I had a panhandle. And I had to walk up to people on the street, put out my hands, and ask for money. And that was such a great way to learn how to communicate effectively in an asking scenario, and learning to be transparent and honest, which is what worked for me. In other words, the quick answer is no, of course not. But boy, it helps. And the last piece is, if you really can't do this, if you stutter uncontrollably, if you have an anxiety attack, if you cannot do it, well, that's what business partners are all about. Is you've got to recognize, what are the weaknesses that I have that this business would really, really benefit from, and go out and find someone who is your alter ego. Partner yourself. I mean, if you look at Microsoft, you have Bill Gates, who's this consummate nerd who for years and years was partnered with Steve Ballmer, who is the salesperson's salesperson. And somehow, that thing works. So quick answer, no, but boy, it really helps.
That's great. That's great. And I hope to see one of your emails hanging in the Louvre one day.
Oh, now I've put this unrealistic expectation. Now I can't just bang one off to you, Dan. I'm going to have to practice.
This is a work of art.
I tell you what, sometimes, this is true, I'll go back and look at emails that I sent like 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I'll reread it and go, oh yeah, that was really good.
That's awesome. That's excellent. That's great. It's like a professional athlete watching the tape, game tape. It's great.
Exactly.
So you mentioned one of the things you talked about, selling to prospective employees, and there was a question from Soma, who asked if you have any good interview questions or techniques that you like to do when you're hiring, especially if you're a startup and these are people who you've never met before, you don't know a lot of people, you're not getting a lot of personal recommendations.
Yeah. So I'll tell it in 2 parts. So this is a story I don't think it's certainly not a story in the book, and I don't think I've ever even written about this. But at one point, a good friend of mine I was working at a big software company called Borland International, and a good friend of mine was recruited to go work at Microsoft. They plucked him out, paid him a lot of money, and he's at Microsoft. And he's going, he knew me. He knew what I was achieving with Borland, with the direct marketing stuff I was doing for them. And he goes, you've got to hire this guy. And so lo and behold, there I am up in Redmond, and I'm going to be interviewing to work at Microsoft. And after the second interview with some little pimply faced product manager asking me, how many traffic lights are there in New York City? Or why are manhole covers round? This is true. I left. I said, this is bullshit. If this is the way this company behaves, I don't want to be here. This is all, how smart is he? That's the antithesis. And it struck me. And so I've shifted myself entirely when I'm hiring for a position. And the thing that's the critical ingredient is you have to strip personality out of it. You can't, this is not the time to be evaluating for culture fit. This is not to be the time of saying, do I like this person? Because that gets you in so much trouble, because then you end up hiring people because you like them, not because of their fitness to achieve what you need them to accomplish. And I emphasize, need them to accomplish. Myself and my team and my companies spend tons of time before we get that very first candidate in the door is by saying, what does this person need to accomplish? What am I expecting them to do? Not what skills do they need to have? What experience? I could care less. What do they need to accomplish? Then I back into it and say, what kind of things do I think would give this person the ability to accomplish those things? And if I don't have the ability to evaluate that, I make sure to put together a team of people who individually can evaluate whether that person will be able to accomplish the things they need to accomplish. And when they do those interviews, each person knows going in what they need to find out. Not whether I like them or not whether, she's a great person, but can she get the things done that we need her or him to accomplish? And so, as you can tell, those are not set questions. They are individualized to every specific position that I'm hiring for. And what that does is not make it perfect, because you can never expect perfect. You can never expect to get it right every time. But what it does do is at least increase the odds you're going to find someone who, lo and behold, 6-12 months in, is actually accomplishing all the things you expected them to accomplish. And the last little tip I'll give you, and you can tell I've gone way off subject on terms of these aren't interview questions, is my friend Patty McCord, who was the chief people person, chief, whatever you call it, whatever they used to call it, whatever they now call the person who does human resources. She used to say, I want you to picture a movie, and the last scene of the movie is this person accomplishing this great thing. Now, what are the scenes leading up to it? What are the things that they have done in each scene that gets them to that final moment of tremendous accomplishment? And let's sure they have the skills and experience and background to achieve those things.
That's great. That's great. I love that. And now I know why you've never hired me, Mark, because you want to hire people who can do something. So now I understand. Now I understand. So you're that last part about the movie. So we get a lot of questions in the chat. Your background is Netflix, so we get a lot of questions about people wanting to pitch you movie ideas, or how do I get started in movies, or how do I become an actor? So you are not part of Netflix anymore, but you get this question a lot, and let's ask it this time, Mark. What's your advice to these people?
So the first thing is to say is that, Dan, as you mentioned, I don't work at Netflix, so I'm not speaking for Netflix. Also, I'm by no means a deep industry insider when it comes to how companies make decisions about what to produce and who to hire. So take this for what it's worth. But I'm going to give you two different perspectives. I'm going to give you the somewhat discouraging one and the somewhat encouraging one. And the first one is that if you've got this incredible idea for the show, which you're sure is can't miss, for this movie you know has to get made, well, the answer is you cannot pitch it to Netflix. You can't pitch it to Disney. You can't pitch it to HBO or Hulu. They're not going to take a meeting with you. The way this industry works is there are gatekeepers, and that isn't their title. They're not put in place to be gatekeepers, but effectively they are. And it's because, just like in startup land, ideas don't count for anything. What counts is your ability to execute. So when they get a pitch, it's not just the idea, but that pitch is coming from someone that they know has the experience and the background and the connection and the resources to actually see that show get made. Can they attach the right actors, the right directors, the right talent to make sure it gets made? Do they understand what it means to make something on a certain budget? Do they understand enough about what truly does make a great script that can lead into a compelling story? And the people who are those gatekeepers are the people who know how to do that. It's experienced showrunners. It's experienced production companies. It's experienced agents. So if you do have this great idea and you think you have all those ingredients, those are the people whose doors you need to knock on. Now, I'm not saying it's any easier, but they're in some ways set up for that, which is being able to speak to showrunners or speak to production companies or to agents. And if they take you on, they will help you package up this idea, which you then would present to one of the streaming companies. It's not easy. I mean, it takes a long process. It's very difficult, but you've got to work your way up through that process. Now, obviously, like anything, there's no one size fits all solution. It's just, again, like startup land, that if you've got two successful exits for multi-billion-dollar companies, well, yeah, you can raise money with a PowerPoint. But if you're just starting out, no, you've got to demonstrate there's a there, and entertainment is no different. So yes, your son of rhymes, yeah, you can get the production deal. You're into Netflix, not blinking an eye. But if you're much less than that, no, you got to go through one of the gatekeepers. So that's number one. Number two, let's talk about the other big question I get, which is about, I want to be an actor. I want to be an actress. I want to do a script. I want to do content. And so I want to work at Netflix, quote unquote. And it doesn't work that way either. And I'll tell you what I want you to do when you say that is reverse engineer. What is it you really want? And here we go. Number three, just like in startup land, that if you are doing this because you want to be rich or famous, I hate to break it to you, it's extremely unlikely that's going to be the outcome. And so if you say, I want to be an actor or an actress because I want to be rich and famous, no, you're not. You're going to be waiting tables. Unless you're exceptionally talented. And it's 1 in a million. And not only that, it's not, Hollywood is not a meritocracy. Hollywood has huge amounts of luck involved, and nepotism and insider and favoritism. And hey, it's like people say, it's challenging. So, but if the reason you want to be an actor or an actress is because you love creating characters, you love moving the audience, you love the challenge of how do I take on an entirely different persona in a convincing way, well, then what's stopping you? You do not need to do it at Netflix. You can do it in your town. You can do community theater. You can do a YouTube short. You can produce your own movies using extremely low cost and easy equipment and technology. And I tell you, if you're good at it, it shows. I mean, if you look at so many classic cases of people who came out of nowhere, they didn't come out of nowhere. They came out of spending years perfecting their craft in these low impact environments. And they did that for a long time before they were ready to work at they would be acting in a production from one of the big companies. Again, it's not one size fits all. I guess occasionally people are discovered on a drugstore at a bar. Pardon me, at a stool in a drugstore like the 50s, but doesn't happen very much anymore. So just like Startup Land, if you have a company you want to start, you don't need to raise money, just friggin' do it. Do it for the joy of doing it. And the same for being an actor and actress. So there you have it, Dan. There's Marc Randolph's Hollywood Tips 101.
Awesome. Fantastic. Well, so we've got a question from Scott Howard. Saw your tweet about connecting with founders who are building cool things. So Scott wants to know, what's cool for you? What are areas that are getting you excited?
So thank you for the comment. I mean, that is funny. I threw that tweet out there quite sincerely because one of the things which gives me the most energy is this sense of connecting with people who have really interesting ideas and are doing cool things. But wow, there are a lot of you. Oh my God, my inbox. But quite honestly, I love when people reach out to me who are working on cool, interesting things and want to connect with me. I turn my Twitter DMs off. But if you do have something, yeah, comment to that tweet. And I'm working my way through it. I'm doing my best to get back to everybody. But the answer is, I don't have a set definition of what is cool. People a lot of times will ask, what technologies do you like? Or what do you, as if I'm going to say, I only do AI or I only do robotics, but it's not like that. I'm completely eclectic. What I like is someone who has found some really interesting problem, but is attacking it in some completely unexpected way. And ideally with some interesting, different background. And going back to the previous question, not someone who has tried to reverse engineer some way to make a lot of money. That's the least interesting to me. But wow, if you've got some interesting background and during the course of what you do, you've discovered some really problem that's always been there and it seems like no one is trying to solve it, and you've stumbled on some adjacency that, wow, if we apply this, it could change everything. Gosh, I love when I get a chance to brainstorm with people like that. And people, I mean, people from all different backgrounds. I mean, high school kids, 50 and 60-year-old first-time founders, women, people from all different worlds, men. It's the most incredibly cool industry because there is no common denominator. And I think that's what makes it interesting to me.
Great. This one's a doozy, Marc. You ready?
Uh-oh. No, second. Stretch. Okay, we're ready.
Okay. So this is comes from this got sent in earlier from Miracle. So, what advice would you give to a 17-year-old who wants to start a business but has no capital and no idea of what kind of business to start and zero knowledge of business?
And is in prison, and
a lot of challenges.
I was just trying to layer on the. And I'm going to answer this with complete sincerity. There's really no reason you can't start, but you have to start small. I've talked for people who have been heard previous Ask Marks. I talk a lot about the fact that so much of my background and experience as an entrepreneur happened way before I was involved in starting my first company. It was me accumulating all of these skills, which eventually do come into play. It was, I started clubs, I started, publications. I sold things door to door. I did all of these things because those were the building blocks of entrepreneurship. It was convincing people um, to come join me on some chaotic quest where I couldn't pay them. It was trying to figure out how to get someone to buy something. And if they bought one, trying to convince them to buy another one. And there's no reason you at 17, I think that was 17, can't do that. But don't say I'm going to start a big multinational car sharing service. You know, look at some hole that you see in your life or around you. Look for a problem, or as I often say, look for pain and go, what can I do? What can I sell? What can I make? And do it small scale. You don't need to have a website. You don't need to have an app. You can do it door to door. You can do it at a farmer's market. And if you want to do it on a website, you can have a Squarespace page or whatever the equivalent is up in 20 minutes. You can do a Shopify store. All of these things are the building blocks of you starting to understand what makes someone want to buy something from me. What are the associated problems I didn't even know I had? The technology stack is so phenomenal right now that you don't need anything except for that initial idea to get started. I mean, if you want to sell something online, you've got Shopify and you have Shopify, you have Squarespace, you have Optimizely, you have all these tools that are either free or a few dollars a month. And all you have to do is figure out what I want to try. So seriously, pick something and start. It does not need to be repeatable. It does not need to be scalable. It does not need to be world changing. But I want you to get the feeling for what it takes to take some crazy idea and think not about how cool this will be when it gets big, but think, how am I going to, in the next couple of days, take that first step of colliding that idea with reality? And you'll find it's not that complicated. Now, again, you're going to have to do this process over and over and over and over again as you begin to accumulate those skills. But I promise that if you start that, eventually you'll get there.
That's great. And you've talked before about, use index cards and, do things manually till you're ready to go. So a couple of questions have come in about fundraising and finding investors. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about, some people are wondering, like, how do I know when it's time to go bigger? And then two, when I feel like it's time to do that, how do I get started if I don't have many, if any, connections in the investment world? He's thinking, people.
No, I'm just thinking of how to answer that, the latter one. The when to fundraise is reasonably easy, which is you wait as long as you possibly can. The more you know before you put your hands out, the better. The less you raise before you want to raise more, the better. People sometimes feel, oh my gosh, if I don't take this idea and explode it to full scale immediately, well, someone's going to beat me to it. And yeah, maybe 1 out of 1,000 times that'll be the case. But the other 999 times, you are so much better off making sure you know what the hell you're doing on a small scale before you accelerate. You don't want to accelerate something until you know exactly what it is you want to accelerate. I just got off the phone before we jumped on here with an entrepreneur, and I don't want to reveal too much about it. But she had a business, and gosh, it had this beautiful website and this really beautiful product, but she had not, and she'd been running for like a year and a half, but she had not yet done the simple exercises to learn the simple unit economics of the business. And without knowing that was the most important thing to know. And she could have known that so much earlier and so much quicker and for so much less money. But she was so involved in saying it's got to be this scalable and ready and big and beautiful that she missed out on learning the important things. So for God's sake, learn the important things and keep it cheap and simple and ugly until you do. The longer you can hold off, the better. But when you go, oh my gosh, this is working. I do understand what my cost to acquire a customer is. I do understand my churn. I do understand my lifetime value. I do understand all these things I'm going to be bumping into about how to keep customers engaged and returning. And now I need to scale it some. That's when the time comes to say, let me go to the gasoline store and have them pour some gasoline on this fire. But not until then. And it's, listen, most of us don't know, quote unquote, I do. Most people don't walk around with a Rolodex full of investors they can immediately call. You do have to look for it. But back 30, 40 years ago when I got started, yeah, that was hard. I mean, for God's sake, now it is easy. I mean, go on AngelList. Almost every single city has an investors club. Almost every single city has these groups of people who are actively looking to get pitched by people like you. And if you don't know someone directly, you almost certainly know someone who knows someone directly. And so begin working your Rolodex. Um, I hate to be harsh on these things, but if you can't find some people for you to run your idea by, it is a failure of effort and imagination. Unless you're in prison, unless you're, in the depths of the jungle in, northeastern Australia. I mean, it's hard for me to envision you truly being in a place where you can't make that happen. So go.
Excellent, excellent. All right, I think we got time for one more. So I'm going to give you a choice. Do you want a more straightforward one or a little kind of out there?
Yeah, let's try it. I'll take out there for 100, Dan.
Okay. All right. So this question comes from John Gibbs, who asks, "Should billionaires exist?"
Oh, that's a good one. That is one. And because I gotta say, I've got an answer, but my little cancel culture alarm is going off. But fuck it, we're among friends here. Yes, billionaires should exist. There are certainly places in the world where if you don't believe in the capitalist system, you can go and you can live there, and you can try and make that system work. But for better, acknowledged, or for worse, that is how this system is built. That to the people who are taking great risks with capital and stumble onto something amazing, go huge rewards. But listen, don't take a simplistic answer as being simple truth. Because listen, I'm not stupid. I understand, of course, there's huge complexities in an answer like that. But you asked a very black and white question, which is, should they exist? And of course they should exist. Are there better ways for our society to balance the needs of the many with the needs of the few? Absolutely. Should our taxation system be perhaps different? Of course. Is it right for someone who is entirely inheritance-based wealth versus someone who is basically taken tremendous risks in order to make something which is hugely beneficial to mankind to reap some of those rewards? Well, I'm not going to answer that one as a black and white yes or no. So there you have it. I'm entirely comfortable. And what a lot of people, and all billionaires are all different. I'm not a billionaire. But I certainly know a bunch of billionaires, and the ones that I know, I'm trying to think how complete an answer this is, for the most part, I'll say, are tremendously philanthropic. And yeah, there's some who are not. But I'm not going to tar an entire category of people with a single brush because of the bad behavior of a few. So there you go, Dan. That was a good one. But and if you don't like that answer, well, then my name is John Johnson, and I'll be with you. I'll be with you next week.
Well, the chat room is concurring with you, so I think everyone appreciated that. Well, Mark, we appreciate your time and your advice always, and we've done a number of these over this past year. They've all been great. So thank you to everyone who's shown up today and for previous ones, and thank you to Mark for sharing this. And we're going to do more. So if we didn't get to your question today, please send it in. And Mark, do you have any 2023 homework for everyone watching as we go out here?
Yeah, we'll go back to that. I think it was our very first question, which is that if you don't know where you're going to be going, where you want to go, the odds of you getting there are not very good. And so, yeah, I think now especially it's a good time. Your assignment, what do you really want to try and accomplish? And then ask yourself if I put in place the steps I need to get there. Good luck, though, and happy holidays, everybody.
Excellent.